I'm going to be honest. This is, I think, the first time where I think some drivers should be a bit worried about self-driving cars. I know a bit of a strong statement to start off this video, but I want to talk about Waymo and their pricing because now things are getting kind of interesting. Now, in case you didn't know, Waymo is a self-driving car rideshare service, very similar to Uber and Lyft. You pull up the app, you tap a button, it comes, picks you up, brings you to your destination, and drops you off. Very similar to ride sharing. However, the big difference is there's no driver. It's a self-driving car. Now, I've talked before on this channel about a bunch of things when it comes to self-driving cars. I have a video listed below in the description to also a vlog video I posted on my vlog channel where I kind of recorded the entire Waymo trip, the first one I ever took, and it was kind of trippy. It was very weird and odd being in a car with it driving itself. I was in Santa Monica here in California, and I remember like people actually coming up to the car and like taking videos of it because it looked so weird. Me sitting like in the shotgun seat and no one else is in the car, especially not the driver or not a driver, and the steering wheel turning as if it was a driver. It was a super odd feeling, right? But I got to give Waymo credit. It was very smooth. And I remember after that, I did a video about it, basically saying like, wow, like that was kind of weird. Like I thought, I know self-driving cars have been around for a while, and especially if you look at like Teslas, for example, and everything. But I think seeing that in person, in action, and not only just being a self-driving car, but a self-driving car that's now connected to a ride-sharing type app that's basically a ride-share platform, that's a whole other ballgame, especially for my Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, and rideshare drivers out there. It's weird because I think for a lot of industries are worried about AI. Look at what happened with the writer strike, let's say here in LA when it comes to things like ChatGPT and using AI to write scripts and whatnot and dialogue. I think when it comes to ride sharing, I think for a lot of drivers, it's starting to become more on their mind. But here's where things get more scary for me, or more intriguing, is the price. That is the big one because when I took that Waymo ride, I also looked at Lyft and I also looked at Uber. And Waymo was more expensive. Not by a ton, but it still was. So like, I think it was, and I can't remember exactly, I have to be honest with you. It was something like it was like $16, and I think Uber and Lyft was both like 8 to 10, right? So it was a good amount more, but not absurdly more. And I looked at it as a novelty. I'm like, hey, you know what? Might as well take a Waymo. It's fun. Just to try it. I'll do it once. That kind of mentality. I'll do it once just to try it, just to do a video about it as well for like a fun vlog. Here's though where things are now getting very interesting. This is about, I think it was last week. I was looking at different routes here in Los Angeles. And I looked in going from Marina Del Rey to West Hollywood. And the crazy thing was the Waymo price was about the same, if not cheaper than Uber. However, Lyft was cheaper than both of them. And although on one end, people are like, okay, whatever. On the other end, that to me was massively alarming. Almost always, Waymo has always been more expensive than Lyft and Uber. And it typically is. So I want to make that clear. Waymo is typically still more expensive than Uber and Lyft. Now that's starting to not be the case. And that to me is what's alarming for all my drivers out there. Because let's be honest, self-driving cars, okay, yeah, that's a little bit frightening for a lot of my drivers out there and, self-driving technology. Now you have self-driving apps like Waymo. Okay, bit of a bigger scare now because when people go to order a car, they literally have the option, let's say here in LA, because this is only in select areas, might as well say that, and you have Uber, Lyft, now Waymo, right? So this is where things are now starting to go more and more down that kind of Black Mirror path of like, oh shoot, current self-driving cars take over. Uber drivers and Lyft drivers are basically, if I word it like this, human drivers, right? Now going deeper down that path. The big, I think, barrier for me though, or the big catalyst is the price. Because let's be honest, for most people when they go out, they pull up Uber, they pull up Lyft, which one's cheaper? We'll take that one. That's pretty much it. Or someone might just pull up Uber and order it anyway because they're like, Uber's typically cheaper. Or they're the same with Lyft. For example, right now here in LA, for whatever reason, Lyft is typically cheaper. When it comes to Waymo, though, I never thought about ever taking it. I'm going to take it once. I think, if in case you're curious, I've taken it twice. Once because I wanted to try it out. The second time was also because one of my friends wanted to try it out, right? That makes sense. It's kind of like a novelty, like, oh, this is kind of cool. It's more like a fun thing just to kind of say you did, right? Just to try it out because it is kind of weird, being honest. However, they did expand their territory. Back in the day, this is maybe like earlier this year, there's a very small selection of the Los Angeles area that Waymo existed in. It was almost so small, I'm not joking, when I did that Waymo ride, I had to Uber out there and then take a Waymo and then Uber back. So it was kind of funny how I had to like do that kind of process. I was also out anyway, so I figured, hey, why not? But it was kind of a weird thing, right, that I had to go all the way there. Now they expanded their territory. So Waymo was getting more and more popular and servicing more of LA as time is going on. But now this pricing thing, that to me starts to worry me for a couple different reasons. I'm going to be honest. I guess I'm going to say three. Is one, now you could easily see people, and I think this is probably going to happen. It's now almost inevitable. You pull up Uber, you pull up Lyft, you pull up Waymo, which one's cheaper? If Waymo continues on this path of them lowering their prices, it's almost going to be inevitable that a lot of people are going to say, oh, why take Uber Lyft when we can just take Waymo? Because it's typically going to be cheaper. And I do think that right now there is some kind of novelty. Like I said, this trippy feeling of using a self-driving car and being in a self-driving car. I got to be honest. I think now if I were to take another Waymo, it probably wouldn't faze me. Like I'm kind of used to it now. Like even though I've only taken 2 rides, not saying you get over it, but you kind of get used to it pretty quick. I got to be honest, right? So I think the novelty is wearing off, and that could mean that for a lot of people, rather than be like, oh man, I'm going to take this once and that's it, maybe it just becomes more commonplace because it's so much cheaper. Of course, then you have to factor in things like wages, right? Of course, yes, self-driving cars do cost money. I do know that Waymo does have like a team that like will constantly look at different, like there's cameras inside of them, right? Like I heard about one story, I was reading this on Reddit, take it with a grain of salt, but you know, it makes sense that they try to fit too many people in the car. The Waymo was driving for I think like 5 minutes, and then the Waymo pulled over and said, hey, we just got an alert from the support team or the staff watching it. You have too many people in the car. You need to end the ride, right? So there are some human-made or wages that need to be involved to like monitor these Waymos, maybe fix them, all this kind of stuff. But that's way cheaper than paying human drivers when it comes to Uber and Lyft. So of course, like, you know, everyone's talked about, it's been a very recurring conversation in some different ways with AI taking over people's jobs and everything. That is something to be concerned about because, again, they don't have to pay them, which means the wages, or excuse me, the fees for the passenger taking Waymo are way cheaper. And then lastly, which is an interesting one that I never thought about until I started reading more of reports of people taking Waymos and about how much they loved it, is tipping. I have done a bunch of videos about tipping on this channel, of course, about how drivers do not get the tips they deserve, and they deserve more tips. At the same time, it's also one of these kind of annoying and tricky things when you look at like the way people deal with tipping, because I've always been a big tipper, especially being a former bartender and a former Uber and Lyft driver and everything. It's kind of weird now, though, that a lot of people are saying, hey, not only with a Waymo is it going to be cheaper, I don't have to talk to or deal with the driver, which some people might like or might not like that. Like for me, sometimes when I go out, I like the human interaction. I do like the social interaction. I'll be honest. Some people don't, though. Like some people maybe want to get in a car, and I think this is what a lot of people do. They go right to their phone, and if they can do that and not even have to say hi, some people might prefer that. But then 3, not only are we dealing with, again, cheaper prices, not dealing with a human driver, but you don't have to worry also about this added extra thing of tipping, which could make the price even cheaper. So for example, let's say you're talking about a $21 Waymo versus like say a $20 Uber. Yeah, the Waymo is going to be more expensive, but to some people they might say, hey, for that extra dollar, I don't have to tip, which means it's automatically going to be cheaper because typically you tip 20%. That's kind of the standard. I know tipping culture is out of control right now, but 20% is still, I think, a very fair amount. I still can't believe it when I pull up like, or when you see those, when the person flips that thing around and says, oh, it's just going to ask you a few questions, and it starts at 25%. Like, I've seen something that started at 25%, 28%, 30%. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. 20% is fine, right? But if you think about it, 20% on a $20 ride is $24. As opposed to just a flat fee of $21. And yes, there are a lot of people who don't tip their Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. But that's still another factor of people saying, hey, you know what? I don't have to tip at all. Like, it's a Waymo. It's not a human. It's a self-driving entity, right? Who knows? Maybe it would be funny if Waymo says, do you want to tip the AI, maybe the staff behind the scenes. You never know. I wouldn't put it past any company, I think, especially in this day and age, to add a tipping option because they're like, why not? But like I said, this to me, I think is probably the first, because I remember after I took the Waymo, I was concerned. I was like, oof. Like, I think we're still pretty far away from, self-driving cars taking over human drivers. And I do think we are when it comes to ride sharing. I do think we're pretty far away. But the price thing is a big one. I think that this is the first time where I'm like, oh shoot, I actually think drivers should be a little bit aware of this. Because if Waymo continues to lower their prices, especially in comparison to Uber and Lyft, like I said, Lyft was still cheaper, but maybe at some point Waymo's going to find a way to optimize everything in such a way that Waymo is going to almost always be cheaper. Everyone's going to be taking Waymos then because they're like, hey, it's cheaper. And I think for a lot of people, whether they want to admit it or not, price is a big factor. They don't have to worry about tipping. They don't have to worry about dealing with the human. And again, some people might like that. Some people might not. Some people might say, hey, you know what? I don't really care if I have a human or not. Either way, they're like, I don't want to talk to someone. I don't not want to talk to someone. I don't care about whatever. I'm just going to take it anyway. But the price being low is a big thing because I think when I first took it, and like I said, when it was more expensive than Uber or Lyft, I was like, okay, that's not too alarming to me. I'm going to be honest, that wasn't like alarming to me. I'd be like, yeah, whatever. Like the Waymos, whatever. But the price being more expensive, I didn't really think anything of it because I'm like, it's still a self-driving car. It's so new, the novelty. But now that we're approaching this point, and we're already kind of there, where Waymos at some points, I will say they're still typically more expensive, sometimes even more so than Uber and Lyft. But the fact that there are now times, and there has been a time, like I said, that this happened to me last week, where Waymo was cheaper, or about the same price. Now I'm like, okay, this is something to be a bit aware of. Because once the price consistently gets lower than Uber and Lyft, once people, I think, take here in LA, start to realize, oh, wow, Waymo is actually always cheaper than Uber and Lyft. I could see most people saying, I'm not going to check Uber and Lyft. Or, yeah, I'll check them, but Waymo's still going to be cheaper. Even if they do that thing, pull up Uber, pull up Lyft, pull up Waymo, which I know is a lot, pick whichever one's cheapest. If it consistently is Waymo, that means less and less rides for all the rideshare drivers out there. And all Waymo has to do is make another car. And I'm not saying that's easy, but they just have to make another car, make another car, make another car. And yes, there are drivers signing up all the time and all this kind of stuff, but this is an interesting one. I'm going to be honest. This is a bit concerning because you can talk about self-driving cars being super new. You could talk about a lot of people not trusting self-driving cars, and that's another thing. Even though there have been studies, and this is true in reports by Waymo to demonstrate, that if you take a Waymo, it's something like 3 times safer than having a human driver. And I get it. I mean, it's technology. It's AI, right? But it's one thing to have it be self-driving. It's one thing for it to be a self-driving app. It's another thing for it to be a novelty or for a lot of people to be scared of it. But I think once you cross this price threshold, for a lot of people, they call it the almighty dollar. The almighty dollar. For a lot of people, if they get that, if that almighty dollar's in place, where for their hard-earned money, they can get more bang for their buck by having a cheaper rideshare and a cheaper ride, they're going to take it every time.